Hello and welcome to Cracking the Rich Code, the podcast. I'm your host, John Verico. As of this recording, Volume 17 is on the street. You can get Volume 17 of Cracking the Rich Code, and I'm yet to get my copy. I'm getting ready to do so. And the more I find, the more interviews that I do on this podcast with the people who are in 17, the more excited about this volume I am. And I cannot wait to read the chapters that are in here, especially the one that is put forth by our guest today. Kelly Stacey is a business consultant. I'm going to bring her on and we're going to chat a little bit about her journey and how and what she wrote in Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 17. Kelly, how are you today?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show. We
Yes.
wanted to get an opportunity to meet you, to chat with you, and find out a little bit more about you, who you are, and what you wrote about in this book. So you are a business consultant,
Yes.
and I know that can be defined in a lot of different ways. So what particularly do you specialize in, and where's your background there?
So I have over 25 years of working across different verticals, different businesses. And I think
So you
my,
started as a zygote, pretty.
yes, I did. I'm definitely aging myself when I say 25 years. I'm very proud of them. I've rolled up my sleeve in a lot of businesses. I consider myself a transformational leadership consultant, really. I come into businesses, typically businesses that are underperforming. And so I'm met with some challenges. And typically what I'm tasked with is finding out why they're underperforming and helping them turn around the ship. And so for me, being a consultant, being a business consultant is really about going in and making, creating momentum in a business, transforming the business and trying to create the wins as quickly as possible to really, help leadership see the vision that they've really wanted to see, but haven't been able to really see the tangible results from. So it's a tougher route doing transformational like turnarounds basically, but I'm really, really good at it. And I think a lot of that ties back to a little bit about what I wrote about in the book. It's a little bit about how I was raised. I'm really great at understanding what people need and helping them achieve those results.
Wow. So before we dive in, I just wanted to ask, is there a particular type of business that would benefit most from your service?
I've worked in fashion for most of my career, but I've also worked across technology, as well as now I have a very large client that I work with in customer service, customer experience. So I'm pretty. I'd like to think that I'm very niche down, but I can move across really any type of business. My skills are so transferable. I know there's this pull to niche down, but I find myself being able to sit across from a founder and understand what their pain points are. And because I'm really a generalist across the business, usually C-level, CEO, COO, I can usually see what they can't see. I kind of call it night vision. I walk in and I can see the things that they can no longer see in their business and help them figure out how to solve for them.
That is a very special talent to be able to do that. And, we all know what a benefit there can be having somebody from the outside look in and see stuff that we overlook because we do this stuff every day, whatever it is that our job is, our function is, and we're just so set in maybe the way we do things or the way we've always done things or what our product line is and all of that kind of stuff that we don't see the mechanics and what
Mm.
may be wrong and all that stuff. So having that outside perspective is always such a benefit. So how did you develop this particular skill set? How did you become so perceptive?
Well, when I started my career, it was in my early 20s. I was my really close friend from Brazil decided to open up a swimwear business in the United States, and she spoke very little English, and so she came to me to help her start the company, help her write letters to buyers, help her hire people. And I started at the very bottom of the business and basically built the warehouse and moved from operations to sales and marketing to, I mean, really throughout every aspect of the business. And that was about a 15-year span of my career. a lot of what I learned by teaching myself or bringing in people who knew more than I did, whether it was hiring for roles or bringing in consultants and being able to squeeze as much juice as I could. And then, of course, optimize on top of whatever they've suggested. So I've learned by learning how to learn and how to absorb information and apply quickly so that I can fail fast and really optimize quicker. So a lot of it has been self-taught, and that does kind of stem from being so independent at such a young age and being a person who kind of had to figure it out on their own. I fell really nicely into it, but I was also empowered by someone that believed in me, Paula, before I believed in myself, to be quite honest. She just saw that I was a very bright person, and she would say to me, I'd say, I'm not sure if I know how to figure this out. And she'd say, it doesn't matter. Once you do, you'll be better at it than anyone else. And it lives in my brain. I still carry that mantra in my brain. So I think that's kind of how I've been able to, that's why I know you can learn anything. I really believe that if you're willing to put in the time.
That is so critical to have somebody who believes in you, that lets you take that risk to try
Yes.
something new and different.
Yes. I mean, super blessed to know her. I still thank her to this day. I mentioned her in my chapter because having there's a few people in your life that I think are pivotal and directionally which way you go. And she was definitely one professionally that I give 100% thanks for everything that I've become. Now I've put in a lot of reps after leaving Vicks, the swimwear company, and I've worked for over 300 brands since then. But my foundational skill set was built running that business. So.
Now your chapter is called "Slipping Through the Cracks to Cracking the Rich Code."
Yes. And that's an interesting story because when I was a little girl, I was always afraid of walking on piers and slipping through the cracks into the dark water. I had a massive fear of dark
Uh,
water, and I would walk and I would always think that those cracks, when you're walking on the pier, I always thought they were much bigger than they were. And I was just scared, and I would tiptoe. And I lived a lot of my life quietly, trying not to slip through the cracks.
wow. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Tampa, Florida, until I was I think we moved here when I was in sixth grade to St. Augustine, Florida. So mostly in Florida. And then in my 20s, my early 20s, I moved to California, and I lived in California for almost 25 years. And then I relocated back to Florida like 4 or 5 years ago, my hometown.
Back to St. Augustine.
Yes, back to St. Augustine,
Yeah.
which I love. I feel like this is my habitat. I tell everyone I love living here. I love everything about it. But growing up, I couldn't wait to leave, so it's that way. And then now
Always
coming
that
back,
way.
it's always that way. But I grew. Most of my story, happens in California. A lot of my growth happened in California. So I'm grateful for that.
I think that happens with a lot of us. We grow up in a certain environment and we can't wait to get out of it. And we go and explore and we learn and we grow in other places. And then ultimately we wind up coming back to some semblance of home. I've
Yes.
got cousins who lived in a tiny, tiny town called Narrowsburg, New York.
Mm.
The sign says "Welcome to Narrowsburg," and the other side of the sign says "Welcome to Narrowsburg." I mean, it's that.
That's
And I know my cousins just could not wait to get out of this tiny town upstate New York and get out and see the world. And all of them kind of, dispersed as they got old enough. And now all of them have gone and moved back, and they're all
mm.
within maybe half an hour from Narrowsburg.
Yeah, there's something about your roots. I lived in California, and I lived in San Diego, beautiful city, beautiful weather. I never went to the beach because the water was so cold. And so I told myself for 25 years, I don't care about the beach. I don't care about the beach. It's okay. Then I moved back here, and I can't go anywhere without seeing the water, and the water's warm. And I realized I do love the beach. So you kind of build these stories based on where you're at. Like I'll just tell myself the story that the beach is not my favorite place, but I can't spend a day without seeing the beach, So it's interesting how you eventually, I think life brings you full circle in some ways, whether it's to the location or full circle and the things you truly love. So
I love it. I love it. So tell me now, all of the things that you have done during this journey and what you've learned. You said you've worked now with 300 different companies.
300 different brands, so across different
Wow.
consulting or through in companies where I've worked with many brands and certain roles. So I've been exposed to over 300 brands, which is pretty amazing.
That is quite amazing. For those of you who are just tuning in, we are speaking with the remarkable Kelly Stacey, who is a business consultant and a leadership coach extraordinaire. Her chapter is in volume 17 of Cracking the Rich Code, and I cannot wait to dive in and learn more about it. So tell us about your journey, Kelly. How did you Now, I know that you said that you got into this starting off with a friend of yours who wanted to start a swimwear business and that you really kind of started from the ground up. But what made this attractive to you? And when did you realize that you had something to offer other businesses?
I think what made it attractive was that someone really believed in me, and I've I knew that I was smart. I just I don't think I always had the opportunity to really, really shine. And so in that company, I was really enabled. She really enabled a lot of my gifts and my skills. Um, I think when I was in that company over 15 years, I think it was up until probably the last 3 years of being there that I told myself I wasn't good enough. I'm not, I had the, what they call it, imposter syndrome, but it was really just insecurity, right? I was very insecure. I always thought I was someone else in the room would know more, and my instincts were always pretty spot on. But up until the last 3 years, I left as the president of the company, and I really realized, wow, I pretty much mastered this business. Um, and then I started to realize when I started to work in other companies where I would work with underperforming brands or in a role that had an underperforming engine, whatever that role is, I was really good at turning around scenarios, businesses, and kind of moving from like a nosedive to massive trajectory wins. And I recognized that I was able to come in and quickly understand where the gaps were and how to not only solve for the gaps, but really bring people along and bring people forward and move people forward. And that was my massive gift, was really the communication piece of being able to come in and actually, because there's so much about moving a business forward that's people driven. They can block you pretty significantly if you're not getting them on board. I was really good at both. And so that kind of came probably over in the last 5, 6 years, where I really realized, wow, there's not really a business I can't turn around. And I pride myself on really never leaving a business until it's in a better position than when I got there, even if it's sometimes a 2-year project. I just won't. And I also pride myself on having multiple founders ask me to come back and for the next stage of their business, which is something I really, I'm really proud of that.
When you're asked back, that's testimony right there to the fact
Yeah.
that you obviously have made a difference for folks and been able to help them out, and they want to reach out and get your help again, and sure you become a trusted advisor, and that's what's
Yes.
really really critical. Now you've mentioned a few times now you're able to identify the gaps and find the ways to get past those gaps. And that just brings me back to what you said earlier about kind of looking at the cracks and the gaps between the boards on the boardwalk.
Yes, yes. It's something I'm really good at. I mean, I think there was, I had a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I think the trauma really kind of clicked on a gene of, a little bit of fight or flight, a little bit of figure it out before you get there, try to avoid, where is it coming from? Which direction do I need to go? I think that's honestly been a tool in business that I didn't even realize, but I've really built that, pattern recognition, that like, just kind of being that person who's on high alert. I've learned how to master it, intellectually, but also nervous system wise, because you can't do that 24 hours. You can't be in fight or flight personally and then go into a professional environment. So I am known as sort of the voice of reason. I have founders say to me that they love having me around because even when there's a fire, you don't see it in my face. I'm able to calmly figure out which door to use and how to put the fire out. And so I've gotten much better at that. But yeah, I definitely see the cracks. But I also see a lot of the opportunities, the missed opportunities as well. So definitely a skill set from my childhood, though. I'm pretty confident. Yep.
I love that analogy. It really connects well. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the book, the Cracking the Rich Code book, and what made you decide to say yes to the project, and what you chose to write about.
Well, when Jim reached out for the book, I was really intrigued because I'd always wanted to write a book, but with all the busyness in your life, writing a book it seems like something that's more of a fun thing than a requirement. So when he reached out, I thought I could write a chapter, and we had a couple of calls, and I kind of talked to him a little bit about, yes, I'm a business consultant, and yes, I think I've been quite successful in my life, but to me, being rich is about so much more than that. And I kind of gave him a little pitch of, this is kind of directionally what I'd love to write about. And he was like, I think that's perfect. And it just worked at that time of my life. It was just, that was a story I needed to tell, which is the story in this book, was the story I needed to tell, not just for myself, but for my family, but also for people that may see themselves in that story.
You want to share a little bit about what that story is, and what people are going to get out of reading? Now, you don't have to give away the whole chapter,
Of
but
course, of course.
let's
There's a
give
lot.
folks a little teaser.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is my journey through, from childhood, and obviously I have a limited amount of words that I can work with, but I was able to compact all the way from my childhood and some of my experiences, and all the way through my adulthood until now, the age of 52, and some pivotal moments that I had throughout that time in my life. And one specifically was at 45, and you know it's interesting when I tell you this, because most people from the outside, well, everyone thought I had everything just perfectly ticked and tied in my life. I mean, I looked great on paper, and I was really operating pretty well. I mean, I'd have the typical, my back went out, or my stomach's hurting, or I'm grinding my teeth at night, and all these things were happening, but no one really knew. And I was always able to exercise through it, or eat better through it, or diagnose it. But really what was happening is I had a lot of just internal anxiety, and a lot of that was stemmed from trauma, childhood trauma. And so at 45, I had, I don't know, a massive anxiety attack. I couldn't breathe. And it was a pivotal moment for me, a turning point in my life, where I ended up working with a life coach for a year, and really discovering some key tools that I brought not only into my life, but I've also brought with me into my professional career, and how I work with founders, how I work with teams. But it's really the story of when your outside doesn't match your inside, right? And being very open and vulnerable and honest about that, and how that ties into who I am today, how I operate in business, and how I operate as a parent, as a mom, to my beautiful daughter, and how kind of how I live. So when I wrote it, it was definitely kind of raw and very open about who I am, and what I was experiencing, and what I've learned. And I'm continuously learning. And now I'm 52, and I was 45 when that happened, and I'm continuously learning. But the crazy thing is, when I was writing this, I was back in San Diego visiting my family, and I stayed with my sister-in-law, who I've been married for almost 25 years. And we sat on the couch one night, and it's the first time we've actually really spent time outside of Christmas, or, the holidays. It's very superficial. We all love each other, but not really getting deep. And we ended up having these conversations because I was in the middle of writing this. And she told her a little bit about my life. And she told me, I don't think I ever really knew you until today. After 20 something, 24 years at that point of being married, I don't think I really knew you. And I mean, I always liked you, but I don't think I knew you. And we grew. I didn't realize how much I did mask some of the things that, who I was, because I didn't want to wear my childhood as an excuse. I didn't want to be the person who was like, oh, poor me, poor me. I actually did the opposite. And I just worked my way through proving that I had worth, and proving that I mattered, and proving that, I just, those things don't define me. I kind of went all the way. The pendulum swung really far to the right, and didn't really deal with some of the stuff that was kind of hibernating inside my body.
Yeah, I think we all have a tendency to do that, right? We put up a mask, so we don't want to show off uh, our vulnerabilities. We don't want to share
Mhm.
those things and let people see the things that are, our own fears. because we're afraid
Right.
somebody's going to take advantage of that.
And they do. I
I,
mean, I've had people in my life, I've learned that the hard way, where I had a few
unfortunate.
moments where I got really vulnerable and shared very, very private things. And then that person used them against me. And so that taught me another lesson of, okay, well, I've learned now, and that's another tool that I share in my chapter, about how you let people into that very inner circle, and how, I think I've just learned a little bit more boundary setting and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely, I grew up in a time, I'm 52. I think there was a time when you just didn't air your dirty laundry. You just didn't talk. Trauma wasn't a thing.
We didn't.
Anxiety wasn't a thing. It was just, oh, you're not anxious. You know, you're just the kid that never stops thinking, or whatever it is. I think there's now more. It's more acceptable to talk about those things, and I'm actually very open about, where not, when I have anxiety, I'm like, okay, it's this is something I carry in my bag. Sometimes I have it, and sometimes my mind goes faster than it should. But I recognize it more, and I don't see it as a weakness. I see it as a strength. The fact that I've gone through what I've gone through, it helps me to relate to people in business. It helps me to relate to founders in such a way.
And it's even a greater strength, just the fact that you have an awareness of it,
Yes,
right? And when things are happening, you recognize the symptoms, and you're open about them.
yes,
And that is so critical, because, like I said, we hide things, and we wind up hiding them from our own selves, and that just eats us up inside. And it got to a critical point.
yes, it
And
did. Yep. It's so true. And I see that. And I think when you're open, you're vulnerable, you bring, people are much more open with you. And I think, when I think about my in business, of course, I always have great boundaries as far as personal and professional, but I still allow people to see that I'm human. And I tell people
that's exactly
we
it.
people are human. We have a business full of humans, and that's the most important asset we have. And people need to feel safe. They need to feel that they're heard, and they need to feel that they matter, and they need to feel like that they have that there's a roadmap for them to grow, right?
You're
Um,
preaching to the choir here. Those are
yeah. So this is yeah,
exactly the same points that I focus on. Yes,
yeah. So it's like I
absolutely.
believe that, and I'm grateful that I've had that opportunity, because you meet a lot of people in business that have, you bring your stuff to work. People say check it at the door, but you just can't. People bring some of this stuff to work, and you have to be able to identify it, and get over some of these humps too, to move the business forward.
Right. It's that's what makes a well-rounded person, right? They have to have a whole life. It's
Yeah.
it's not just it's not just the office, and recognizing that human factor, and that people are more than just what they do at work. That
Yes.
is really hard. And sometimes it's really difficult for people to define that in their own selves. I
Yep.
know, I'll work with a group, and I'll have everybody introduce themselves, right? And then now they work together, they know each other, but they're introducing themselves to me. But every one of them will tell me what they do as a job,
Right.
right? And they'll say, "Oh yeah, I do this, I do that," and one or two of them might say, "I'm a mom," or whatever. Most of the
Yeah,
time, we define ourselves by our work, and we
we
don't
do.
realize, there is a whole person there. And you brought up the point earlier on, right? We don't do business with businesses; we do business with people.
Yes.
It's all
Yes.
about relationships, and human relationships, and making sure that we're connected. We are talking Speaking of being connected, we are talking with
Mhm.
Kelly Stacey, who is, I'm going to say now, a connection expert, as well as a business consultant, and a leadership coach, and somebody that I know I would want to work with. I mean,
Mm.
she is really very dynamic, and has a unique insight, a unique ability to have great insight into um, the mechanics of an organization, the culture of an organization, and the way people work together. And I think those are really, really special and important points. So thank you, Kelly,
Thank
for
you.
sharing all of that. We still have some time, but I'm going to ask, is there something that you want people to take away when they read your chapter? What do you want them to think, do, or feel differently as a result of what you wrote?
Well, I hope that some people will see themselves or see someone that they know in my chapter and recognize where people are. And I hope that they will build some empathy, knowing that everyone brings their stories with them. And sometimes you don't always know what their story are. Sometimes the people that show up, it's not really the people that you're really trying to, to bond with. And I hope that parents or professionals or even, I talk about all the way I start, I go through my high school. I was just a massive overachiever. I hope that there are high school students that could read this and say, "Oh my gosh, that's who I am." And
Mhm.
I don't want them to wait till they're 45 to figure out that they can't breathe and can't take their kid to school because they can't breathe. I would rather them figure out, kind of do some of that work before and recognize and be okay to not be okay sometimes because that's life. So for me, I wanted to get a little bit of my legacy on paper, and I wanted to share it with, my daughter as well, because some of the things she read in here, she read for the first time. She's 18, and a big part of, um, I think, me changing generationally, breaking through some generational trauma. And so, for me, it's just I hope that people see themselves in it and they can relate to it, and hopefully it builds some empathy. I think for people to recognize that people aren't always what you think they are, and everyone has a story, right? And so,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we relate to, people's
yep,
stories, and we
yep,
see ourselves in them, and that's just a beautiful thing. And thank you so much for opening up and for sharing yourself with the world, and creating a place where people may see themselves and maybe find some hope and some value.
yes,
So I really
yes.
appreciate that so much. So how do you want people to get in touch with you if they'd like to reach out? I know you like LinkedIn is a
Yeah,
good.
LinkedIn is great. Definitely. I always accept connection requests until LinkedIn tells me I have too many. I'm very open with that because I love it when people connect with me. So doesn't matter your title, I connect with everyone. And then my website is workwithkellystacy.com. So that's another way that you can reach out. But I'm really active on LinkedIn. So if you reach out to me, I'll always reach back.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. This has been a delightful conversation, everyone. This is Kelly Stacey, a business consultant extraordinaire. She's out of St. Augustine, Florida, but I have a feeling she will work with anybody anywhere.
Yes. Yes, I will.
We'll definitely check her out. Connect with her at LinkedIn. She is Kelly hyphen Stacey, and it's Stacey. I say that out loud so that people who are only listening to the audio of this can know how to find you. It's Kelly hyphen Stacey on LinkedIn. You can find her, and you can also go to her website, which is workwithkellystacy.com, all run together. No punctuation or weirdness in between. But thank you very much. And check out volume 17 of Cracking the Rich Code and look for her chapter. You're definitely going to get some wonderful insight from falling through the cracks to cracking the rich code. This is with Kelly Stacey. Thank you very much. I'm John Verico. It's been wonderful being your host today. Kelly, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.